In Eau Claire, I'm known as Old Virginia Abernathy, the woman whose wrinkled hands have held the ledgers of half the city's construction projects for 50 years. I'm 78, and I'm still out for a walk at 6:30 sharp every morning, regardless of the weather. They say you can check your watch by me. Today, the snow squeaks under my winter boots, the only sound in the pre-dawn silence of a December morning. The cold air makes my old bones whine, but I keep walking along Water Street, past City Hall, past the courthouse where every stone holds stories I remember better than last night's dinner. "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy," shouts Silas Taft, opening his hardware store. His grandfather once helped me with my tax returns, and my father, for as long as I can remember, has always sought accounting advice. "The usual regardless of the weather? Fresh air is the best cure for old age, Silas," I answer, and he smiles, nodding his head. Respect. That's something I've never seen from my daughter Juliet and her husband Brandon. I continue on my route, and my thoughts take me back decades to when I was just starting my career at Fortuna Construction. A young widow with a young daughter in her arms, no college degree, just a natural aptitude for numbers, and a tenacity that gritted the teeth of anyone who tried to get in my way. Now all that's left of that company are memories and a few buildings downtown. But many people still remember how I found ways to fund projects even in the toughest economic times. "Virginia!" Helen Price calls out to me as I pass her house. She comes out onto the porch in a fluffy robe. "Will you come in for coffee?" Helen is one of the few remaining friends my age. She used to be the mayor's secretary, and all the city's secrets passed through her hands. "Next time, darling," I reply. "I have to buy a present for Juliet today. Christmas dinner is coming up." Helen's face darkens. She knows my situation all too well. "You're too kind to them," she shakes her head. "After everything that happened last year." I wave her words away, though in my heart I agree. Juliet and Brandon had last Christmas at their new house that they bought without even consulting me. "You wouldn't have liked it anyway, Mom," Juliet said then. I sat in an uncomfortable chair in the corner all evening while my son-in-law showed off a new stereo system worth my semi-annual pension to the guests. When I get home, I notice the mailman waving at me. "Mrs. Abernathy, I have a letter for you." It looks like an invitation. I thank him and take the envelope. On the glossy paper it says, "Christmas dinner at the home of Juliet and Brandon Hollister." Inside, a printed card with the date, time, and a request to confirm attendance. No personal signature, no love, Juliet. Just a formality, like I'm just another coworker from work. I sigh and place the invitation on the kitchen table. My daughter has always been a difficult child. Back in high school, she used to look at me with poorly concealed disappointment when I showed up to parent-teacher conferences in my only decent outfit, bought on sale. She dreamed of a glamorous mother and got a workaholic in worn shoes that smelled like office dust. When she met Brandon while attending community college, I hoped her life would get better. Tall, with looks that could be called attractive if it weren't for the constant smirk of superiority, he seemed like a determined young man. He opened a small machine shop, which surprisingly quickly began to generate income. They were married after 6 months of dating. "He's a future millionaire, Mom," Juliet bragged. "And you spent your whole life in your accounting department, and what did you get?" I did not tell her that on the money of her mother's downtime in the accounting, she got her education and the down payment on their apartment, and that I'd always been alarmed by the speed at which Brandon's wealth was growing. The phone rings, interrupting my unhappy memories. "Virginia?" It's the voice of Aiden Holt, chief of police of Eau Claire and son of my late friend. "How you doing, old girl?" "Better than most young ones," I answer, smiling. Aiden's one of the few people who still calls just to see how I'm doing. "I'll come by the other day," he says. "We need to talk about something." "Is something wrong?" I ask, feeling my back tense. "Nothing urgent." His voice sounds casual, but I know Aiden too well. "Just work stuff. Your advice might come in handy." After the conversation, I sit down in the chair by the window. The snow starts to fall harder, and I watch a neighbor boy trying to make a snowman. I should call him over for hot chocolate when he's done. From my dresser drawer, I pull out an old photo album. Here's Juliet at 5 with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. Here she is at prom, with her hair carefully styled and in the dress we picked out together. And here's their wedding picture with Brandon. I remember that day, Juliet was shining with happiness, and I felt a strange emptiness inside, which I wrote off as maternal longing. The first cracks in our relationship appeared shortly after the wedding. Juliet started canceling our weekly lunches. Then she stopped calling. When I went to their house myself, Brandon often greeted me with poorly concealed irritation. "Did you come to check up on us again?" He'd say with the same smirk that made me grit my teeth. "I just wanted to see my daughter," I answered calmly, though I was seething inside. It had gotten worse over the years. Juliet took a job as a receptionist at a local clinic and immersed herself in the image of a successful couple. Their house, their cars, their travels, everything had to scream prosperity. And somehow my presence in their lives was getting in the way of that image. "Mom, can you please not come to the barbecue this Saturday?" Juliet was on the phone. "There'll be important people from the clinic there and, I did." I was a reminder of her humble roots, that she wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. It hurt, but I'd long ago learned not to show the pain. The doorbell interrupts the flood of memories. Lorna Whitley, my neighbor, stands on the doorstep. "Virginia, honey, I made a blueberry pie and I thought you might like a slice," she says, holding out a plate. "Come in." I invite her in. "I'll put the kettle on." Lorna, a retired elementary school teacher, follows me into the kitchen and notices the invitation on the table. "Oh, you've been invited to Juliet's Christmas dinner?" she asks, and I nod. "Are you going to go?" "Of course," I answer, pouring water into the kettle. "She is my daughter, after all." Lorna frowns. "After what happened at Thanksgiving. You're too kind, Virginia." Brandon drank too much at Thanksgiving and started ranting about how some old people are a burden to their children, glancing in my direction. Juliet didn't stop him, just giggled nervously as the other guests looked down at their plates. "Family is family," I say, though I don't believe the words myself. Lorna shakes her head but doesn't argue. We drink tea and cake and talk about more pleasant things. The upcoming Christmas festival in town, the new book at the book club, Lorna's grandchildren who are coming for the holidays. When she leaves, I'm alone with my thoughts again. I need to pick out a gift for Juliet. Something expensive and impressive that will make her, if only for a moment, see me not as a burden, but as the mother who has always supported her. I put on my coat and scarf, preparing to head downtown. Maybe Avery's jewelry store will have something suitable. The last time I gave Juliet a piece of jewelry, she smiled almost genuinely. Before I leave, I glance in the hallway mirror. Her gray hair is neatly styled, wrinkles crisscrossing her face like lines on a topographical map. The marks of a long life filled with work, worries, and yes, disappointments. But I can still see the steely gleam in his eyes that once made contractors nervous when I found discrepancies in their estimates. "You'll do fine, you old nag," I say to my reflection and walk out of the house. The snow has stopped, and the streets of Eau Claire are starting to come alive. I walk slowly, greeting the people I know. In half a century of living in this town, I know almost everyone by name. A young bank employee whose name I can't remember gives way respectfully. A flower store owner waves from behind the counter. These small gestures of respect warm the soul. At the jewelry store window I stop, looking at the fine jewelry. Maybe a silver bracelet or pearl earrings. Something to show that I'm still capable of giving decent gifts despite my modest retirement, as Brandon likes to emphasize. The bell above the door jingles as I enter the store. May this gift be another attempt at a relationship. Let Juliet see for once how much I love her, no matter what. With a heavy heart, I make the decision to go to this Christmas dinner. A silver bracelet with amethyst lies in a velvet box on my dressing table. The price was exorbitant for my budget, almost a fifth of my monthly pension. But how could I skimp on a gift for my only daughter? Juliet has always loved amethyst, though now she prefers more expensive stones, which Brandon gives her with an incomprehensible generosity for a car mechanic. Christmas is 2 days away, and my hands are stroking the burgundy-colored holiday dress I bought last year and have only worn twice. Not too dressy so as not to annoy Juliet, but not too modest so Brandon wouldn't have an excuse to joke about grandma style again. The phone rings, interrupting my musings. It's Aiden Holt. "Virginia, I'm at your door. Open up, old lady." A minute later, I meet him in the hallway. Aiden is a tall man of 55, with a thick mustache touched with gray and attentive eyes that always seem to be assessing the situation. Tea? Coffee? I offer, ushering him into the living room. Coffee, if it's not too much trouble, he replies, taking off his uniform jacket and hanging it on the back of a chair. And please, without ceremony. I'm just popping in for a quickie. While I make coffee, Aiden looks at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Many of them are of him and his father, my longtime friend Harry Holt, who was sheriff of Eau Claire when Aiden himself was still playing cops and robbers in the backyard. Remember when Dad used to catch me stealing apples from Mrs. Baker's garden? Aiden laughed, pointing to one of the pictures. You bet I do, I smile, setting my cup down in front of him. Harry did that whole handcuffed raid to teach you a lesson. We both laugh, but soon Aiden turns serious. Virginia, I'm here to talk about Brandon. I sit down across from him, feeling my heart start to beat faster. What's wrong with him? Aiden takes a sip of coffee as if gathering his thoughts. We're investigating a string of car thefts in the county. 24 cars have been stolen in the last 6 months, all high-end models. Most of them were never recovered. What does that have to do with Brandon? I ask, even though I already know the answer. His auto shop. We have reason to believe it's used to dismantle stolen cars. Parts are then sold through fake online stores. I close my eyes. Strange workshop hours, unexpected prosperity, Brandon's new acquaintances with questionable reputations. It all adds up to a clear picture. Do you have proof? I ask quietly. Enough for a search warrant. One of the hijackers agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. We're almost ready for the operation. I feel hot then cold, Juliet, my only daughter. What's going to happen to her when her husband goes to prison? When? Is all I can ask. Aiden looks me straight in the eye. That's up to you, Virginia. I came to warn you precisely because you're Juliet's mother. I can postpone the surgery until after the holidays. Give you a chance to prepare your daughter. I understand what he's offering. A chance to talk to Brandon, convince him to surrender voluntarily, or at least prepare Juliet for the inevitable. Give me time, I say after a long pause. At least until after Christmas. Maybe he'll come to his senses. Aiden nods, understanding my feelings. Just until after the holidays, Virginia. I can't wait any longer. There's too much evidence, too many interested parties. When Aiden leaves, I sit still for a long time, staring out the window at the snow-covered street. The clock on the wall counts down the minutes with mechanical ruthlessness. What should I do? Warn my daughter? Talk to my son-in-law? Or let justice take its course? That evening, I decide to call Juliet. Mom? Her voice sounds surprised, as if a call from her mother is something out of the ordinary. Is something wrong? No, darling, I answer, trying to sound casual. I was just wondering what to bring for Christmas dinner. Maybe dessert or wine? Oh, she sounds a little more relaxed. Don't worry about a thing. We'll have everything. Just be here at 6. Juliet, I start cautiously. Maybe we could get together before Christmas, have lunch together. I haven't seen you in a while. The pause on the other end of the line seems interminable. I'm sorry, Mom, but I'm very busy getting ready for the holiday. Maybe after New Year's? After New Year's, when her husband will probably already be behind bars. I'm swallowing a lump in my throat. Of course, darling. Whatever suits you. As I hang up the phone, I realize I still haven't gotten around to talking about what's important. Cowardice? Or maternal instinct to protect my daughter from pain, if only for the holidays. The next few days pass in anxious anticipation. I wrap a gift, prepare holiday clothes, buy an expensive bottle of wine, ignoring Juliet's words that, you don't need to bring anything. Outwardly, I remain calm, but inside everything is clenched by the impending disaster. On Christmas Eve, I meet Lorna Wheatley at the supermarket. She's picking out a turkey for her family. Virginia, she exclaims when she sees me at the canned goods shelf. Are you ready for dinner tomorrow night? As ready as I can be, I answer with a fake smile. Lorna leans closer. Did you hear the news? Ashley Morton, who works at the clinic with your Juliet, is also invited to dinner tomorrow night. She says Juliet invited half the clinic's administrative staff and a few doctors. Sounds like your daughter is trying to impress. I nod, not surprised. Juliet has always been keen to be the center of attention for the right people. And then there's that new reporter from the Eau Claire Daily, Lorna continues. Reeve Sanders. They say he's doing a piece on small business in our town and is particularly interested in your son-in-law's auto shop. My heart skips a beat. A reporter? Interested in Brandon's business? Has the press gotten wind of the investigation? Are you okay, Virginia? Lorna asks worriedly. You look pale. I'm fine, I assure her. I'm just a little tired from the holiday rush. When I get home, I call Aiden. What do you know about reporter Reeve Sanders? I ask him without preamble as soon as he picks up the phone. How do you know about Sanders? I can hear the surprise in Aiden's voice. He's invited to Juliet and Brandon's Christmas dinner. They say he's interested in the machine shop. Aiden sighs. Sanders has been digging up a lot of businessmen in town. He recently wrote a scathing article about the fraud at the Pitts car dealership. He's a good journalist, the kind of guy who's not afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. Does he know about your investigation? Not officially, no. But this guy's got sources everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if he got wind of something. After my conversation with Aiden, I sit at the window for a long time, looking out at the Christmas lights of the neighboring houses. What's going to happen tomorrow? How will Juliet react if the truth about her husband's business comes out right around the holiday table? Christmas morning greets Eau Claire with a fresh snowfall. I wake up early and the first thing I do is check my phone to see if there are any messages from Aiden or Juliet. The screen is blank. I breathe out a sigh of relief. At least things are going my way for now. After breakfast, I pull out the box with the bracelet and admire the shimmering amethysts once more. I wonder if Juliet will remember when she said purple was the color of princesses. I doubt it. Toward evening, I dress especially carefully. The burgundy dress fits me well for a woman of my age. Modest pearl earrings, a gift from my late husband, complete the look. I examine myself critically in the mirror. I'm not too fancy, so I don't outshine the hostess, but I'm not too poor, so Brandon can't make another remark about my modest lifestyle. I'm calling Aiden before I go out. Is everything on track? I ask quietly. So far, he answers. Enjoy the evening as much as you can, Virginia, and remember, you can call me anytime. On the way to my daughter's house, I think back to the last conversation I had with Aiden 2 days ago, when he stopped by after his shift. We were sitting in the kitchen, and he laid out some pictures in front of him. Here's the evidence we have, he said, pointing to the pictures. Cars that are brought into Brandon's shop at night. The license plates match the stolen cars. And these are invoices from the online stores that sell the parts. It all leads back to your son-in-law, Virginia. Does Juliet know? I asked, feeling my hands shaking. Aiden shook his head. We're not sure. She could be guessing, but we have no direct proof of her involvement. What's he facing? 5 to 10 years if he cooperates with the investigation, more if he doesn't. I remember clenching my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Give me time to talk to him, Aiden. Maybe he'll come to his senses, turn himself in. That would soften the sentence, wouldn't it? Much. Aiden nodded. But I can't wait forever, Virginia. After the holidays, we act. I understand. Thank you. Aiden gathered the pictures and hid them in the inside pocket of his jacket. Don't thank me. I'm doing this not only for you, but also for Juliet. I'd rather she learn the truth from her mother than see her husband led out in handcuffs. The cab stops in front of Juliet and Brandon's 2-story house. I pay the driver and freeze for a moment, looking out the brightly lit windows. The Christmas tree, visible through the living room, glows with lights. There are voices and laughter coming from the house. How many of these people will be left behind if the truth about Brandon comes out tonight? Clutching a gift in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other, I walk up the steps and ring the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opens and I see Juliet in an exquisite red dress, a glass of champagne in her hand. Mom, she says with a strained smile, you're just in time. Come in. I enter the house and the festive atmosphere comes over me in a wave. The smells of cinnamon and roast turkey, the sounds of Christmas tunes, the glitter of decorations. About 15 people are already gathered in the living room. I recognize a few of them: Dr. Russell from the clinic where Juliet works with his wife, Nora Finch, the superintendent, a young man with a notebook who must be the reporter, Reeve Sanders. Brandon is standing by the fireplace, surrounded by several men. He's laughing loudly, telling some story. Noticing me, he pauses and nods. "There's the mother-in-law!" he announces with that same smirk I hate so much. "Welcome to our humble abode." Humble abode. A $500,000 house with furniture that costs more than I've made in the last 5 years of work. All this on the income of an auto mechanic and a clinic administrator? I force myself to smile and hold out a bottle of wine to him. "Merry Christmas, Brandon." The evening is just beginning, and I can already feel the tension stiffening my shoulders. Will this be the last Christmas Brandon spends on the outside? And how will I find a way to talk to him alone in a house full of guests? Juliet walks me to the hors d'oeuvres table and introduces me to a few co-workers. I nod politely and answer questions, but my attention is on Reeve Sanders, who is now talking to Brandon. The expression on my brother-in-law's face is no longer so confident. He looks around a lot, as if searching for ways to get away. "Mom," Juliet whispers, leaning toward me. "Please don't tell stories about your work today. Some of the guests might find it uninteresting." I hold back a sigh. My job as an accountant, which paid for Juliet's education and the down payment on their apartment, is now considered uninteresting to her sophisticated friends. "Of course, dear," I reply calmly. "I'm not here to talk about myself." Juliet nods with relief and steps aside to greet the new guests. I'm left alone with a glass of champagne, watching what's going on in the living room. A young man in an austere suit approaches the hors d'oeuvres table. "Mrs. Abernathy?" he addresses me. "I'm Reeve Sanders from the Eau Claire Daily. I heard about you from Chief Holt. He says you know the history of this town better than the city archives." I smile, flattered by Aiden's words. "Warden Holt is exaggerating. I've just lived here long enough to remember a lot of things." Reeve looks at me with genuine interest. "I'm working on a series of articles about small business development in Eau Claire. Your son-in-law's auto shop is one of the fastest growing businesses in town. Don't you find that surprising in our economic situation?" I can feel my facial muscles tensing, but I keep my smile. "In business, there are many factors that go into success, Mr. Sanders. I'm sure my son-in-law works very hard." Reeve nods, but I see the same shrewd look in his eyes that his father, a former Eau Claire police detective, had. No doubt about it. Although some of the business practices may raise questions. For example, why does the shop often work at night? And why do they bring in cars without license plates? My heart's starting to beat faster. He knows. Or at least he suspects it. "You'd have to ask Brandon about that," I answer cautiously. "I've tried." Reeve glances over his shoulder at my brother-in-law, who's now actively avoiding the reporter. "But he's not very talkative on the subject. Maybe you could—" "Minus Mr. Sanders," I interrupt him. "It's Christmas. It's a family holiday. Why don't we save the business talk for another day?" Reeve looks at me understandingly. "Of course, Mrs. Abernathy. I apologize for the indelicacy." He steps back and I take a deep breath. Things are heating up. If even the press is already interested in the nighttime activity at the auto shop, then rumors are spreading. How much more time does Brandon have before it all comes crashing down? Dinner was served at 8 p.m. Juliet and Brandon's dining room shone with festive decorations, silver polished to a shine, crystal candles in elegant candlesticks. The smell of roasting turkey and fresh baked goods filled the room, creating an idyllic Christmas scene. If it weren't for the tension hanging in the air, one might have believed I was really at a family holiday party and not on the brink of disaster. I was seated at the end of the table between Dr. Russell and his wife Elizabeth. Juliet and Brandon took the seats at the head, as the hosts of the house should. The reporter, Reeve Sanders, sat almost across from me, continuing to discreetly observe Brandon, who was growing more and more nervous with each glass of wine. "Mrs. Abernathy," Elizabeth Russell turned to me. "Juliet told me that you worked as an accountant all your life. That must have been interesting." Her tone made it clear that interesting was not the word she really meant. "Oh, more than interesting," I replied, slicing the turkey into small pieces. "Numbers tell stories just as well as people if you know how to listen to them." Dr. Russell smiled politely. "I can imagine." Although in medicine we trust concrete numbers more than interpretations. In accounting too, I observed. The balance either adds up or it doesn't. No gray areas. Brandon, having heard our conversation, didn't miss the opportunity to interject. That's why your profession is almost obsolete, isn't it, Virginia? Computers do all the work and all people have to do is push buttons. I smiled, not showing how I was hurt by his words. Technology changes, Brandon, but principles remain. Honesty in finance will never go out of style. I noticed Reeve Sanders tilt his head slightly, listening to our conversation. Brandon noticed it too and hurried to change the subject. So, Dr. Russell, how is the construction of the new wing of the clinic coming along? The conversation shifted, and I was able to finish my dinner in peace, watching the others. Nora Finch, Juliet's boss, glanced at her watch as if waiting for something. A young couple from the clinic, Ollie and Tess, I think, were talking passionately about their upcoming vacation. Everyone looked relaxed and content, unaware of the storm that was about to erupt. After the main course, Juliet stood up holding a glass of champagne. Before we move on to dessert, I would like to thank everyone for sharing this celebration with us. Brandon and I are honored to have such wonderful guests in our home. She looked around the table, lingering on me for a moment. I'd also like to make a small announcement. Brandon and I are planning a big trip this spring, a month in Europe. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I shuddered. A month in Europe? With what money? The question must have reflected on my face because Juliet suddenly looked at me with irritation. What, Mom? Do you have something to say about this? All heads turned in my direction. I felt the color rush to my cheeks. No, dear, that sounds wonderful. But you're obviously thinking something, Juliet insisted, her voice growing more and more strained. Come on, share your wisdom with us. You always know the best way for us to live our lives, don't you? Brandon put his hand on his wife's shoulder, but not to reassure her. He looked at me defiantly, encouraging Juliet to continue. Juliet, I said quietly, let's not what? She interrupted me. Let's not talk about how you're always looking down on us, even though you've worked a boring job all your life and never amounted to anything. There was an awkward silence at the table. Dr. Russell coughed, his wife studying her glass with exaggerated interest. Reeve Sanders, on the other hand, did not hide his attention to the unfolding scene. I've never looked down on you, I replied calmly. I've always been proud of you. You're lying, Juliet raised her voice. You always thought I wasn't good enough, that my successes weren't impressive enough, that Brandon wasn't worthy enough. Brandon stood beside her, putting his hand on her shoulder. With that same smirk I hated so much, he was savoring this moment, pushing my daughter to the brink. Juliet, I tried again. Let's talk about this later, in private. This isn't the time or place. Oh, of course, she exclaimed. You always do that, avoiding confrontation in public to look like a saint and then lecturing me behind closed doors. I noticed Nora Finch glance at Reeve Sanders, who was writing something down in a notebook. Of course, for a reporter, family drama is great material for a story. I decided it was time to put an end to this. I think I'd better go, I said, folding my napkin neatly next to my plate. When I stood up, Juliet laughed, a cold, unpleasant laugh that I'd never heard from her before. Yeah, sure, go away. As always, running away instead of solving problems. Juliet, please, I said quietly. Don't do this, especially tonight. I didn't want this evening to end like this. I didn't want the last Christmas before the inevitable storm to be marred by an argument. But Juliet, urged on by Brandon, couldn't stop. You know what, Mom? She walked over to me, her eyes glistening with anger and champagne. I only invited you tonight because I thought it was the right thing to do. But I didn't really want you here. I never have. Juliet, Dr. Russell began, clearly embarrassed by what was happening. No, doctor, let everyone know the truth, my daughter interrupted him. My mother always thought she knew best, always judging me, my decisions, my husband, always insinuated that our progress was something suspicious. Well, Mom, we've achieved all this. She circled the luxurious dining room. Without your help and despite your doubts, I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Where had my little girl gone, the one who used to come running to me with broken knees? Who asked me to read to her at bedtime? Who cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak? I never doubted you, Juliet, I said quietly. Only in the ways in which some successes are achieved. My gaze met Brandon's for a moment, and I saw a glimmer of worry in his eyes. He realized that I knew, or at least he suspected I knew. I'm leaving, I repeated, heading for the exit of the dining room. Thanks for dinner. Juliet followed me into the hallway, Brandon behind her. Most of the guests remained in the dining room, but I could hear some pushing back their chairs, probably figuring the feast was over. Don't think you can ruin our reputation with your innuendo, Juliet hissed as I put on my coat. No one would take the word of a jealous old woman against a successful married couple. I froze, stunned by the cruelty of her words. Envious old woman? Is that really how she sees me? Juliet, I began, trying to remain calm. You are my daughter and I love you. But you must know that— Stop it! She raised her voice. I don't want to hear your moralizing. I don't want your doubts and suspicions. She walked to the front door and swung it open. Go away right now. Juliet, I made one last attempt. Listen to me. There are things you need to know about Brandon's business. Out! She shouted, pointing at the door. You're not family anymore. You've never been a real mother to me. It's always just work, work, work. And now that I'm finally happy, you're trying to ruin everything with your suspicions. Brandon stood behind her back with his arms crossed over his chest. The same smirk played across his face. Only now there was something triumphant about it. He'd finally gotten what he wanted, a complete break between me and my daughter. Several guests appeared in the hallway, attracted by Juliet's screams. Among them was Reeve Sanders, who no longer concealed his professional interest in what was happening. Juliet, I said, still trying to get through to her, please listen to me. I'm not saying this out of jealousy. I'm saying this because I'm worried about you. I don't want your worries. She cut me off. I don't want you. Get out of my house and out of my life. With those words, she slammed the door in my face. I heard the lock click. Through the window, I saw Brandon put his arm around Juliet's shoulders, his face contorted with laughter as he whispers something in her ear. She nods back, wiping away her tears. I stood on the porch, stunned by what had happened. Snow fell silently around me, settling on my hair and coat. The frost stung my cheeks, but I could barely feel the cold. Something inside me had finally broken, that last thread of hope that my daughter would one day see the truth. Slowly, I walked down the porch and headed to my car. I got behind the wheel, but I didn't start the engine. My hands were shaking and I clenched them into fists, trying to control my emotions. You're not family anymore. The words rang in my ears, causing almost physical pain. My own daughter had disowned me in front of all these people. And for what? For a man who was about to lose everything because of his crimes. I pulled my cell phone out of my purse and dialed Aiden Holt's number. He answered after the second ring. Virginia, is everything okay? No, Aiden, I answered, surprised at the calmness in my voice. Nothing's okay. I just left Juliet's Christmas dinner. What happened? I could hear the worry in his voice. She kicked me out, said I wasn't family anymore. I paused, gathering my strength. And you know what? She's right. We're not family anymore, and I'm not going to protect her anymore. Virginia, Aiden said carefully, are you sure you want to talk about this on the phone? I'm absolutely sure. I straightened up in the seat, feeling the determination crowd out the pain. No more postponements, Aiden. No more indulgences. Do what you have to do. You mean, yes, I consent to a public announcement of the investigation. Right now. Tonight. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Aiden took a deep breath. Okay, Virginia, I understand. We've already prepared all the materials in case you change your mind. He paused. Are you sure you don't want to wait until tomorrow? Give yourself some time to cool off? No, Aiden, no postponements. I looked at the house where the holiday lights were still on. They're enjoying their triumph. Let this be the last time they celebrate together. Whatever you say. His voice has become businesslike. I'm on duty now. I'll give the order immediately. Local news stations will have the story within minutes, and I'll send patrols to the machine shop right away. Thank you, Aiden, I said quietly. Don't thank me, Virginia. It's my job. He was quiet for a moment. Do you want me to send someone to pick you up? No, I'm fine. I'll drive home on my own. I ended the call and continued to sit in the car looking at my daughter's house. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. An alert from a local news app had arrived. I opened it and saw the headline, Urgent! Eau Claire police conduct operation at auto shop suspected of links to auto thefts. The article mentioned Brandon Hollister's name as the owner of the shop and the prime suspect. Details of the investigation were mentioned, including information that stolen cars were dismantled for parts, which were then sold online. I imagined all the guests in the house now, including reporter Reeve Sanders, receiving the same notification on their phones, how they look at Brandon, realizing who he really is, as Juliet tries to figure out what's going on. At that moment, the door of the house opened and Dr. Russell and his wife came out onto the porch. Their faces were tense, and they walked quickly toward their car without even looking back at the house. They were followed by Nora Finch, holding the phone to her ear and furiously saying something. One by one, the guests left the house, some glancing toward my car, but no one approached. The last to leave was Reeve Sanders. Unlike the others, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stood on the porch talking on the phone and making notes in a notebook. I saw Juliet's face appear in the window, pale, with an expression of shock and incomprehension. Brandon was standing next to her, his cocky grin gone, replaced by an expression of panic. I started the engine. There was no reason for me to stay and watch the outcome. I'd made my choice. And now the wheel of fate was in motion. I slowly pulled onto the road and headed home, leaving behind the house that would now never be a family home for me. In my rearview mirror, I saw police cars with blinkers pull up to Juliet and Brandon's house, the patrols that Aiden had sent out right after we talked. I felt sorry for Juliet, but I could no longer protect her from the consequences of her own choices. "You're not family anymore," she told me. And in a way, it freed me. Freed me from having to close my eyes to the truth, from endlessly trying to reach her, from the pain of rejection. The snow was falling harder and harder, covering the city in a blanket of white. Christmas in Eau Claire was always beautiful, the lights reflected in the snowdrifts, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But for me, this Christmas was the end of one chapter of life and perhaps the beginning of another. As I drove away from Juliet and Brandon's house, the last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was general confusion. Guests were leaving the house one by one, some almost running, as if they were afraid that their presence at the suspect's house might tarnish their reputations. Reeve Sanders, on the other hand, lingered on the porch, frantically taking notes and talking on his phone, his reporter's instincts telling him he was in the midst of the biggest city story of the year. But I couldn't imagine what was going on inside the house when guests began receiving notifications of the police operation. It wasn't until later the next day that I learned the details from Lorna Whitley, whose nephew Nate was one of the invitees. According to Nate, it all started with a distinctive notification sound that came from several phones almost simultaneously. The guests pulled out their devices and a wave of amazement swept across their faces, followed by disbelief and then barely concealed condemnation. Dr. Russell was the first to break the silence. "Brandon," he said, looking at the screen of his phone and then at the owner of the house. "It says here that the police are searching your auto shop in connection with a car theft investigation. Is there some kind of mistake?" All eyes turned to Brandon, who was frozen with a glass of wine in his hand. His face paled, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Of course it's a mistake," he replied with a strained smile. "Some ridiculous mistake or misunderstanding." But his words sounded unconvincing even to himself. Juliet, who was standing nearby, snatched the phone from the hands of the nearest guest and ran her eyes over the text of the news alert. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Brandon, what's going on?" "Nothing, dear," her husband hastened to assure her. "It's just a misunderstanding. I'll call my lawyer and everything will be cleared up." But it was too late. Among the guests was Dwight Pierce, an assistant district attorney who had already received reports from colleagues confirming the information. "I'm afraid there's no mistake, Brandon," he said, looking at messages on his phone. "I just got a text from the DA's office. The police have solid evidence. They found parts from stolen cars in your shop, and this isn't the first time they've checked." Brandon tried to keep a straight face, but his grin turned into a grimace. "It's all fake. Someone's trying to set me up." Who? Reeve Sanders asked, who didn't miss a word. Do you have enemies, Brandon? That can't be, Juliet intervened, her voice getting higher and higher. We're honest people. Brandon is working hard. This is some kind of mistake. But the guests were already starting to look around, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. Some were already pulling out their phones to call a cab. I'm sorry, Dr. Russell said, rising from the table. But Elizabeth and I are going to go. Thank you for dinner. Nora Finch, Juliet's boss, looked at her subordinate with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Juliet, she said, also standing up, I hope this is really a misunderstanding, but I have to go. We'll talk in the office tomorrow. One by one, the guests began to leave the house muttering awkward apologies. Dwight Pierce, the assistant prosecutor, stayed the longest. Brandon, he said quietly, if you want free advice, get a good lawyer, right now. When most of the guests had already left, Juliet finally realized the magnitude of what was happening. She turned to Brandon, her eyes widening in horror. Is it true? She asked in a trembling voice. You really, all those cars, all that money? Brandon didn't answer, his face contorted with rage. He was furiously typing something into his phone, probably trying to contact his accomplices or his lawyer. Brandon, Juliet shouted, grabbing his arm. Answer me, is it true? Get off, he yelled, pushing her away. I need to think. At that moment, Juliet noticed police cars pulling up to their house. She ran to the window, her face contorted with horror. They're here, she whispered. The police are here. Brandon looked out the window and whined. Then he rushed to the back door, but it was too late. The cops had already surrounded the house. Bastards, he hissed. Someone ratted me out. Someone knew everything and was following me. And then Juliet realized it. She turned slowly toward him, her face white with shock. My mother, she whispered. She knew. She tried to tell me today, and I slammed the door in her face. Your mother was always too smart for her own good, Brandon hissed. I told you to stay away from her. You used me, Juliet looked at him with growing horror. You used my resentment toward my mother to keep us apart, to keep me from listening to her. Don't be silly, Brandon snapped at her. I loved you. It's just that your mother was always the problem. There was a knock on the door, a loud, demanding knock. Eau Claire police, open the door! Juliet moved toward the door as if in a trance, but Brandon grabbed her arm. Don't you dare, he hissed. I need to talk to my lawyer first. But it was too late. Reeve Sanders, who was still inside the house, went to the door and opened it. Here, officer, he said with undisguised journalistic excitement. The cops entered the house, and Brandon immediately realized the game was over. He raised his hands in surrender. Brandon Hollister, said the officer, you are under arrest on suspicion of involvement in auto theft and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Juliet stood with her hands to her mouth, watching her husband being handcuffed. All her illusions of a happy, successful life were crumbling before her eyes. Mom knew, she repeated, as if in a trance. She knew, and she tried to warn me, and her voice broke. I told her she wasn't family anymore. Meanwhile, I returned to my quiet house on Maple Street. My hands were still shaking as I hung up my coat in the hallway. I turned on the television, tuning into the local news channel. As I expected, a live broadcast from the scene was already on. On the screen, I saw the familiar building of Brandon's auto shop. There were several police cars parked around it with their blinkers illuminating the night sky. Uniformed and civilian-clad cops scurried back and forth, some carrying boxes of documents and parts. A young reporter in a red coat stood in front of the shop and spoke into a microphone. We are reporting live from the scene of a police operation at Hollister Motors. According to reliable sources, the owner of the shop, Brandon Hollister, is suspected of being involved in a scheme to steal and dismantle cars. According to preliminary reports, more than 20 stolen vehicles have passed through the shop in the past 6 months. The camera showed a close-up of police officers removing engine parts and boxes of documents from the workshop. As a police source told us, the reporter continued, the investigation has been underway for months. The police have witnessed statements and physical evidence linking the shop to a series of auto thefts in the area. I sat staring at the screen, feeling a strange mixture of feelings. There was no satisfaction or triumph, only fatigue and a deep pain for my daughter. I felt sorry for Juliet, but I could no longer protect her from the consequences of her own choices. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Aiden. "Virginia, are you home?" he asked without preamble. "Yeah, watching the news," I answered. "We found everything we were looking for and more. Parts from at least 15 stolen cars were found in the workshop. The computer has a database with a list of parts and prices, names of buyers, dates of transactions. It's a real gold mine for the investigation." "And Brandon?" I asked. "He's in custody. He's being questioned right now. He's denying everything, of course, but there's more than enough evidence." Aiden paused. "Juliet's at the station too. Not as a suspect, just to testify. She's, not in the best of health." I closed my eyes, imagining my daughter sitting in a cold police station, broken and confused. "Did she know?" I asked quietly. "I can't say for sure yet," Aiden answered cautiously. "She claims she had no idea of her husband's illegal activities. And frankly, I'm inclined to believe her. She seems genuinely shocked." I breathed a sigh of relief. At least my daughter isn't an accessory to a crime, just a blind, gullible woman who let love and ambition cloud her judgment. "What happens now?" I asked. "Brandon will be arraigned in the morning. Given the amount of evidence, his lawyer would probably advise him to plea bargain." Aiden was quiet for a moment. "Virginia, you should know. Juliet's been asking about you. She wants to talk." I felt my heart clench. "What did she say?" "That she had made a terrible mistake. That she didn't know about her husband's business. That she should have listened to you all these years." I shook my head, though Aiden couldn't see it. "This isn't the time, Aiden. She needs to deal with her life, and I need time too." "I understand," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know. Get some rest, Virginia. Tomorrow is going to be a hard day for all of us." After the conversation, I turned off the TV and sat in silence for a long time. Snow continued to fall outside the window, covering the world with a white blanket that hid all the flaws and imperfections. If only human mistakes could be hidden and forgotten as easily. I remembered how a few years ago, when Brandon first opened his workshop, I noticed the first signs that something was wrong. Business was booming too fast for a budding entrepreneur. Juliet suddenly started wearing expensive jewelry and clothes that were clearly beyond the young couple's means. "Brandon is a very talented mechanic, Mom," Juliet said when I gently questioned the sources of their sudden prosperity. "He has a special way with his customers. People recommend him to each other." I tried to believe her, but my gut told me something wasn't right, especially when I happened to drive by the shop late at night and saw cars without license plates being brought in. "Mom, you're just jealous of our success," Juliet cut me off when I tried to share my concerns. "You've worked your whole life, barely making ends meet, and Brandon and I have made it in just a couple years. It's hard for you to accept." Her words hurt, but I didn't give up. I started gathering information, discreetly asking people I knew in town about Brandon's workshop. Gradually, the picture became clearer, and when Aiden hinted at starting an investigation, I wasn't surprised. "Be careful with the accusations, Virginia," Aiden warned me then. "This is a serious case. If your brother-in-law is really connected to the car thefts, he could be dangerous." But I kept trying to get through to my daughter, hoping she'd have an epiphany before it was too late. Every time I saw an expensive new item in their home or heard about plans for another luxurious vacation, I asked careful questions that Juliet took as the nagging of a jealous mother. "Why can't you just be happy for us?" she asked resentfully. "Why are you always looking for a catch?" "I'm just worried about you," I replied. "I want you to be happy, but I also want that happiness to be built on a solid foundation." "Oh, Mom, stop with your accounting metaphors," Juliet said irritably. "Our foundation is love and mutual respect, something you and your father never had." That was a low blow. My late husband, Robert, wasn't the perfect life partner, but we respected each other and built our daughter's future together. And that future was now crumbling because of a man who had cheated on her from the beginning. My musings were interrupted by the doorbell. I glanced at the clock, almost midnight. Who could have come so late? I cautiously walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Juliet stood on the porch, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying, her makeup smeared across her face. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in one night. I opened the door, but stayed standing on the threshold. Mom, Juliet whispered, her voice shaking. Mom, you were right. All this time you were right. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to hug my daughter, to protect her from pain like I had done when she was little. The other part remembered her words. You're not family anymore. I didn't know, Mom, Juliet continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. I swear I didn't know what Brandon was really doing. I trusted him. I believed his business was honest, that our livelihood was earned honestly. And when I tried to hint to you that something was wrong, I asked quietly, when I told you that your income seemed suspiciously high for a workshop and clinic administrator, I thought you were just jealous, Juliet admitted, lowering her head. Brandon said, he said that you could never accept that we'd accomplished more than you had in your entire life. And I believed him over you. And tonight, I crossed my arms over my chest. When you kicked me out of your house, told me I wasn't family anymore? Juliet sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I was a fool, Mom. I let him manipulate me, turn me against you. He always knew how to play on my feelings, on my complexes. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. You're the only person who was always there for me, the only one who really cared about me. And I betrayed you. I looked at my daughter, so lost and broken, and I felt the ice around my heart melt, but not completely. Too much pain had built up over the years, too many hurts and disappointments. Juliet, I said at last, it's late. We're both tired. Do you need a place to sleep? She nodded, wiping away her tears. The police have sealed our house as part of the investigation. I didn't know where else to go. You can stay in the guest room, I said, backing away from the door to let her through. But we both need time to sort through all of this. I can't just forget everything that happened. I understand, Juliet replied quietly, stepping into the house. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Mom, I swear I didn't know about what Brandon was doing. I was blind. 3 months had passed since that Christmas night that changed our family's life forever. Winter was slowly receding, giving way to a timid spring. Meltwater ran through the streets of Eau Claire, washing away the remnants of snow and mud. It was as if the town itself was trying to cleanse itself of the scandal that had shaken its quiet life. Brandon remained in custody, refusing to make a deal with the investigation, confident that his expensive lawyers could win the case in court. Naive self-confidence, a quality that I now realized had defined his entire life. The evidence against him, however, was overwhelming. In his workshop, they found not only parts from stolen cars, but also a whole warehouse of forged documents, license plates, and tools for breaking locks. Juliet was left alone in a large house, which was soon threatened with confiscation. It turned out that the mortgage had been taken out with money obtained through criminal activity, and the house itself was being used to launder illegal proceeds. All accounts were frozen and credit cards were blocked. My daughter went overnight from a respected member of society to the wife of a criminal, shunned by former friends and coworkers. In the first weeks after Brandon's arrest, Juliet lived with me. She was depressed, spending most of her time in the guest room, rarely coming out even to the table. I tried to help her, but an invisible wall persisted between us, created by years of mutual resentment and frustration. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast, Juliet came down to the kitchen and sat down at the table. Her hair was carelessly pinned up in a ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. Mom, she began, nervously tugging at the sleeve of her sweater. I've been thinking about our situation, about what's going to happen next. I set the cup of coffee in front of her in silence, waiting for her to continue. I talked to the lawyer yesterday, she continued. He says there's a chance I can keep some of the assets if I can prove that I didn't know about Brandon's illegal activities. But to do that, I need a steady income, a good reputation in the community. I'm starting to see where she's going with this. What do you suggest? I asked, sitting down across from her. I was thinking that maybe we could start a family business, Juliet said, trying to speak casually. You have a background in accounting. I have a background in administration. We could start a counseling agency or something like that. It would show the court that I'm trying to start an honest life and help you keep your house and car, I finished for her. Juliet lowered her eyes. That's not the only reason, Mom. I really want to make things right, to start over. With you. But there was no sincerity in her voice. I knew my daughter too well. She hadn't repented her attitude toward me all these years. She just needed my help now, when everyone else had turned their backs on her. Juliet, I said softly but firmly, I won't be a part of this. What? She looked at me puzzled. But why? I thought you wanted to help me. I want to help you get back on your feet, find a job, a place to live. But I won't be your lifeline that you cling to because you're drowning. Mom, I don't understand. Her voice shook. I thought you forgave me. This isn't about forgiveness, Juliet. I took a deep breath. It's about the fact that you still don't realize what you did. You apologized for not believing me about Brandon. But you never once apologized for the years of neglect, for the way you both treated me, for all the times you let your husband humiliate me in front of others. Juliet was silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. I'm offering you a real chance to make things right, she continued after a pause. We could be a family again. A family, I repeated. The same one you cut me out of at Christmas? You're not family anymore. Remember those words? Her face paled. I was upset. I didn't know what I was saying. No, Juliet. You knew exactly what you were saying. Those words didn't come out of nowhere. They were the result of years of alienation you deliberately created between us. And now what? She asked, her voice growing colder. Are you just going to throw me out on the street? Of course not. I shook my head. You can stay here until you find a job and a place to live. I'll help you with the down payment on the rent, but we need time and space to sort ourselves out, separately. The next day, Juliet found a job at a small store on the outskirts of town, the only place that would accept the wife of a man accused of organizing a criminal scheme. 2 weeks later, she moved into a small apartment in the old Eau Claire neighborhood. We exchanged formal goodbyes, both realizing that our relationship would never be the same. Meanwhile, my life began to change in surprising ways. The story of how I had spent months trying to protect my daughter by begging the police to delay Brandon's arrest became known around town. People looked at me with a new respect, not as a lonely elderly woman, but as a man of principles and wisdom. One morning on my usual walk, I was approached by Nora Finch, Juliet's former boss. Mrs. Abernathy, she said, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. I wanted to apologize for the way the entire clinic staff behaved at that Christmas dinner. We should have intervened when Juliet started talking to you like that. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize, Nora. It was our family drama. And yet, she insisted, I admire the way you've tried to protect your daughter all this time, despite her attitude toward you. It's impressive. After that conversation, others began. People who used to barely say hello to me on the street now stopped to talk to me. People started inviting me to community events, asking me for financial advice. Even the mayor of Eau Claire, Patrick Donovan, invited me to join the city's budget planning board. We need people with experience and principles, Virginia, he said. And you have both. In April, as the first flowers began to break through the thawing ground, Reeve Sanders published a big article in the Eau Claire Daily about the Brandon case. He detailed the pattern of a group of car thieves connected to the auto shop. But what surprised me most was that a significant portion of the article was about me. Virginia Abernathy, Juliet Hollister's mother and the defendant's former mother-in-law, displayed a rare combination of insight and compassion these days, Reeve wrote. Suspecting something amiss in her son-in-law's business, she did not rush to accusations, but tried to protect her daughter, giving her time to realize the truth. Even when the investigation was ready to enter its final stages, Mrs. Abernathy asked the police for a delay, hoping that her son-in-law would come to his senses or her daughter would see the truth for herself. Only after her own daughter publicly disowned her at a Christmas dinner did Virginia consent to her arrest. The article caused a wave of sympathy in the city. People stopped me on the street expressing support. Some shared similar stories from their own lives, how they had to make the difficult choice between loyalty to family and loyalty to their own principles. One spring day, Aidan Holt invited me to lunch at a new cafe downtown. You've become a local celebrity, Virginia, he said with a smile as we sat down at a table. Half the town is talking about your wisdom and resilience. Don't exaggerate, I said, though I was flattered. I just did what I thought was right. And that's what people admire, Aiden said seriously. There are so few people nowadays who do the right thing, regardless of the personal consequences. We talked about Brandon's upcoming trial, about how Juliet was coping with her new life, about the latest city news. As lunch was coming to an end, Aiden suddenly took my hand. Virginia, I've been meaning to ask you for a while. Would you be willing to go with me to the Spring Festival this weekend? Not as witnesses in the Hollister case, but just as, friends? I felt the color rush to my cheeks for the first time in years. I'd love to, Aiden, I replied, surprised at my own reaction. As I drove home, I thought about how strange life had turned out. Only a few months ago, I'd been a lonely old woman, barely tolerated by my own daughter. Now, however, I felt more alive and needed than ever before. There was a letter from Juliet waiting for me at home. A real paper letter, not an email or a phone call. I carefully opened the envelope and began to read. Dear Mom, she wrote, I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, about what you said about my attitude toward you all those years ago. At first I was offended and thought you were being unfair to me. But then I started to remember all the times I'd let Brandon talk disrespectfully about you. All the times I'd canceled our meetings for his plans. All the times I'd put his desires ahead of your feelings. You were right. I never really apologized for it. I was so consumed with my own pain and frustration that I didn't see yours. It took me losing everything to realize how much I really had. I'm not asking you to accept me back into your life. I know I have to earn that right. But I want you to know, I am truly sorry for every moment I made you feel unwanted or unloved. You deserved a better daughter. Love, Juliet. I reread the letter several times, feeling my eyes fill with tears. It was the first genuine remorse I'd seen from my daughter in all these months. Not an attempt to use me to solve her problems, but a genuine admission of guilt. I didn't answer the letter right away. We both needed time. Me to learn to trust again, her to really change. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe one day we could build a new relationship. Not the same as before, but maybe more honest and respectful. Meanwhile, spring was in full bloom in Eau Claire. I resumed work at the public library, helping with bookkeeping twice a week. I joined the city's budget planning board. I started taking art classes at the local college, a hobby I'd always dreamed of but never found the time for. My morning walks became longer and more pleasant. I now often stopped to talk to neighbors and acquaintances who were genuinely interested in what I was doing. Lorna Whitley and I started a book club that quickly became popular with the older residents of the town. One Saturday morning, on my way back from the farmer's market, I saw Juliet coming out of a small cafe. She looked different, simpler dressed, no expensive jewelry or designer bag. But there was a new confidence in her posture, not the arrogance I'd seen before, but the quiet dignity of someone who accepts her life as it is. Our gazes met across the street. She smiled slightly and nodded. I responded in kind. We didn't approach each other, didn't speak. It wasn't time yet. But that silent greeting meant more than all the words we could have said. As we walked back home, I thought about how strangely life works. Sometimes you have to lose what you think is most important in order to find something more valuable. I lost the illusion of family well-being, but gained real respect and friendship. I lost the role of the mother who is always ready to forgive and accept, but I gained the power to set boundaries and respect myself. That same evening, Aiden picked me up to take me to the spring festival. At 55, he looked elegant in casual slacks and a sweater, his graying mustache neatly trimmed. We spent a lovely evening strolling among the festive tents, listening to music and chatting with the townspeople, many of whom now greeted me like an old acquaintance. You know, Virginia, Aiden said as we sat on a bench watching the fireworks, I've always admired you. Ever since I was a boy and saw you arguing with contractors and making them redo work if it wasn't up to standard. Do you really remember that? I wondered. It was so long ago. I do, he nodded. My father used to say you were the most honest woman in Eau Claire, and the most stubborn, he added with a smile. We both laughed, and I felt a warmth rise in my chest. Not the passion of youth, but something deeper and calmer, the comfort of being with someone who sees and appreciates you for who you are. When the fireworks were over, Aiden walked me home. At the door, he shifted awkwardly from foot to foot like a teenager on a first date. "It was really nice spending the evening with you, Virginia," he said finally. "Maybe, do it again sometime?" "I'd love to," I replied, feeling a smile forming on my face. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, staring at the starry sky. A life that seemed finished just a few months ago was suddenly filled with new possibilities and joys. I lost my toxic relationship with my daughter and son-in-law, but gained self-respect and true friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. As I fell asleep that night, I thought about the words my mother once said to me. Sometimes you have to let go of one branch to grab onto another. All my life, I had clung to the idea of family, to the role of a mother who must always forgive and support, even at the cost of her own dignity. Now I finally let go of that branch and found that I could fly. In the morning, I woke up with a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I put on my coat and went out for my usual walk. Eau Claire was waking up. The sun was rising above the horizon, painting the streets with golden colors. I walked my usual route, past City Hall, past the courthouse, past Silas Taft's hardware store. "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy," Silas shouted, opening the door of his store. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Most beautiful, Silas," I replied with a smile. "The most beautiful day." And for the first time in a long time, I really felt that way.